That's a little better. I wondered how that was going to come out this morning because I think this one's on tape, isn't it? That's great. Well, I notice he's rooting for Peyton Manning and the Broncos, and I find myself in a bit of a conundrum because, Peyton was in Indianapolis for a long time, but I'm also very good friends with the chaplain of the Seattle Seahawks. And in fact, the Seahawks, some of you may not know it, actually put together an evangelistic DVD to send out. They're not the whole team, of course, but several members of the team, including the starting quarterback, Russell Wilson. And they're sharing their testimony of faith in Jesus Christ and how the kingdom of God is greater than football. And I think it's wonderful. I sent a little message to my friend, the chaplain, Carl Payne. Some of you may know him. We actually carry one of his books out of our resource table. And said, this kind of reminds me when Tony Dungy and Lovie Smith were, took out big page ads and got the evangelistic campaigns going. So I'm glad when people in the public eye are willing to step up and say something for Christ. I was also a little caught off guard, though, when Dave pulled out his cell phone. That's probably the first time I've ever seen anybody do the morning reading from a phone. At first I thought he was texting God or something. I'm like, what is he doing, But anyway, I kind of figured it out halfway through. Okay, so it's always a pleasure to be here in East Tennessee, and I'm honored that Robert has given me the opportunity to fill in for him while he's gone. This is Mount Rainier, right outside of Seattle. That's actually my screensaver, but wasn't the picture I was expecting to see when I looked up there. I want to share with you a little bit today about success, and I'll tell you a little bit about, in my family, one of the things when I first got married, in fact, before I was married, when I was dating my wife, and we would have these conversations about, possible life together in the future, and one of the things I was most nervous about was, I said, I don't know if I'm going to be a very good dad. He said, I'm just really nervous about, doing this and taking this next step because, it's just so, I'm afraid I'm going to screw up my kids so bad that they're going to be in therapy for, another decade or so. And she's like, oh, don't be silly. You're going to be a great dad. But now we found out therapy may be needed. But even so, you do the best that you can. And I remember even when it came to like disciplining the children, one of the things I tried to do with my kids was be a vision caster for them, even in times of discipline. And what I mean by vision casting is I would almost always use one particular word, and that word was success. And I would say I've got a 13-year-old son right now, and he, in the last year, has gone from 5'2" to 5'8", and he's about 220 pounds. And so, we've crossed that line where I can, wrestle him down and win. So we have new rules in the home. The new rule is don't hurt Dad. And so he was an all-conference offensive lineman last year, as you might imagine. He was kind of the biggest guy around. So, but I'm very proud of him. I've got a 23-year-old daughter. I say that all the time. She's 22. She's a 22-year-old daughter who just graduated from college. She's actually teaching Latin and ancient history at a local Christian school. So I say that because it makes me look good. I got a daughter who's teaching Latin, right? Okay, so but she is actually my son's Latin teacher, which is kind of a neat dynamic to see them interact because they love each other. I think it helps that they're 10 years apart. So, but even when it was my daughter who was growing up, or whether it was my son, when it came time for discipline, I would say to them, look, I subscribe to a couple of theories with this. One was I bought into the theory early, don't discipline when you're angry. Wait until you've calmed down first. So like if they did something, I was really mad, I said, go to your room, we're going to talk about this in a minute. Because I wanted to give myself a chance to gather myself and do this in a way I would not regret. So they would go to the room, I would calm down, I would pray, I'd get myself focused, and I'd go in, and I would always start out this way. I said, listen, What I'm about to do here, I'm about to do because I want you to be a success in life. There's a vision that I have for you in this life. I would like to see you be a success. I want to see you have a life that you enjoy. I want to see you have a life with lots of friends. I want to see you have a life that's successful in a lot of different ways. He says, and right now, the kind of decisions that you're making are not going to lead there. And because I love you, I have to correct you. I have to get you off of the direction you're on and onto another direction. Because if I let you keep going this direction, you are never going to get to that life that I'm envisioning for you. And I'm talking about a life that you would, full of joy and friendship and love and a life that God will bless. I want you to be a success. Now, whatever the discipline was that was meted out, I tried to put it in the context of the vision that I had for them. They understood this is what we're really after. In fact, sometimes I went a little far with this whole, process because I thought, I really want to be a good dad. And I when my son was about 8 years old, I thought, I'm going to write him a little booklet on what it means to be a success. And so we took a Sunday morning where we skipped church. I know. We took a Sunday morning where we skipped church and the two of us just went to the park and we loaded up our bikes in the back of the van and we rode all around the park and we got some McDonald's and we sat, then we sat down together and I took out my little booklet and I said, hey, why don't we just read this thing together that I've written? And it started with, the whole thing was, what does it mean to be a success? And how do we get there? And I took it from Proverbs chapter 3. So Proverbs chapter 3 begins like this. It says, my son, do not forget my teachings, but keep my commands in your heart, for they will prolong your life many years and bring you peace and prosperity. Now, does that second verse sound familiar at all? Let me read it again. They will prolong your life many years and bring you peace and prosperity. Does live long and prosper ring a bell? I just realized that what I did wrong here. Excuse me. Okay. There it is. Okay. All of a sudden it dawned on me, when there is a tech problem, I have learned it is never their fault. It is always mine. Okay. Yes, we talked to, in fact, so I explained to him that while I'm not a huge Trekkie, the Vulcan greeting is taken from Proverbs chapter 3, verse 2. In fact, there's 3 fingers over here and 2 over here. So you can remember 3, 2, which says live long and prosper. So I said, but the real question here is, how do you get there? So Mike, 4 or 5 years later now, I'm afraid that the only thing he remembers from that talk was this. I'm a little concerned that's going to happen with you today too, but we'll go on anyway. Here's this question. What does it mean to be a success? I asked him, so son, what do you think it means to be a success? He's like, oh, I don't know, Dad. That's your job. I'm like, well, let's think about it. How about winning or losing? Which would be the success? And he goes, winning. I said, yeah. I said, if you want a real simple definition of success you can take away with you, it's winning. And I know in church you're not used to hearing that, right? We're used to hearing a little bit more spiritual explanations of what it means to be a success. But the issue here is success does have to do with winning. I mean, when Moses was holding up his hands when they were in battle, what was he praying for? Victory. Okay. When I'm going out and I'm praying to God for provision, I'm asking for his blessing. And essentially the biblical way of saying I want to be successful is that I want a life God will bless. And so the question here is all right, it's one thing to say that success is about winning, but the real challenge here is knowing what it is you're trying to win at. You realize that you can shoot at the wrong target, that you can aim at the wrong goal, and if you are a success at the wrong thing, you're ultimately a failure. This was driven home to me one time. I was at a leadership conference, and I heard a guy sharing a story about his own father. And his father was one of the finalists to go to the Olympics as a sharpshooter for the Canadian Olympic team. And they it was his turn for shooting. And I'll be honest, I'm not much of a shooter. I had never fired a gun in my life until about 3 years ago, and somebody took me to a shooting range. And that was quite the experience. So So when I tell you that he was a sharpshooter, I have no idea if he was shooting like 100 yards away, 300 yards away, a mile away. I have no idea how far this, but it was far enough away that you couldn't see the bullseye without a scope, and he couldn't, he had to make adjustments by the millimeter and just, squeeze that trigger finger just so. You know what? He hit a perfect bullseye. And he got up and he was like, yeah, I'm going to the Olympics. There's only one problem. He took another look, realized he'd shot at the wrong target. He did not go to the Olympics. I mean, can you imagine how crushing that would be? And yet there's a lesson there, isn't there? It says you can be a success at the wrong things. And there are people who spend their whole lives pursuing the wrong goals. And when they become a success, oftentimes I picture it this way. It's almost like there is this deep chasm of despair on the edge over here. And this deep chasm of despair is the idea that when I die, that's it. This life is all there is, and when I die, that's it. And people who believe like this, what do? They want to be a success in this life. They want to live for this life. And so a lot of times they do become successful at the things that they're shooting for. But I picture it's like they're climbing up this hill, and they finally get to the top, and they've conquered the mountain. And when they get to the top of the mountain, they look around. So oftentimes they find that all they've really done is get a better view of the despair they were hoping to avoid. Because they realize there's got to be more to life than this. That this didn't bring them the satisfaction that they were looking for. And so we understand that if I'm going to be a success, it's about winning, but it is about winning the race of life. So let's look at what the Bible says real quickly about this. What does it say? 1 Corinthians chapter 9, verse 24. Paul says, I beat my body, make it my slave, so that after I preach to others, I myself will not be disqualified for a prize. In the race, all the runners run. Said, run in such a way as to what? Get the prize. Run in such a way as to win. So here's the question. How do you know when you win the race of life? How do you know that you've what you've done? Well, we don't know whether you've won till you get to the end of the race. And that is, so we come to Matthew 25:23, and we get a glimpse of the end of the race. And the idea is that when we get to the end of the race, we want to hear on Judgment Day Jesus say, well done, good and faithful servant. Well done, good and faithful servant. And I look at this and I'm thinking, all right, that means that ultimately life is about serving, isn't it? That I have to define what it means to be a success by serving. Now, this was a point I was trying to drive home to my son that day in the park. One of the points I was trying to get through to him was being a success is not just about being on top. Being a success is about serving other people. The most successful people are the ones who are making a difference in other people's lives, and other people's lives are better because of what they do. He said, but if you don't start serving the people close to you, if you're not a servant to your friends, if you're not a servant to your family, if you're not a servant at your church, then service, that servanthood isn't going to be born in you. It's not just going to come out all of a sudden one day, when you most need it. He said, we need to develop this mindset that says success is built on being a servant. You perhaps heard that you can't lead other people until you've learned to follow. It's the same principle. We have to learn to serve one another. And so talking to my son in that context, I was saying, now the goal of a boy is to learn to take care of himself. All right? Our goal for you, tell Ben, he says, our goal for you is that you learn to take care of yourself. What that means is we shouldn't have to come into your room every morning and tell you to make your bed. We shouldn't have to tell you, put your dirty clothes in the laundry basket, not on the floor next to the laundry basket. Right? We shouldn't have to tell you, go brush your teeth now, it's time to go to bed. One of the goals we have for you is that you have to learn to take care of yourself, because when you become a man, you're going to have to do more than that. Right? You're going to have to take care of a group of people. And so we see men, one of the differences between boys and men is that boys, They're supposed to be learning to take care of themselves. Men are supposed to be able to take care of themselves and take care of other people. And one of the reasons I found that a lot of men struggle in marriage and struggle in parenthood is that they never learn to take care of themselves. And they still aren't taking care of themselves. And as a result of that, now they're and they're overwhelmed and they're over their heads trying to take care of other people because they're still not really capable of taking care of themselves. And it's a real problem, because what you end up with essentially is a little boy who didn't quite learn all the skills that he needed, and now he's become a man and now he's got adult responsibilities, doesn't know what to do with it. And as I've mentioned before when I've been here, when people get in those conditions, there's three things that tend to happen to them. A, they tend to get angry easily. Right? That is, they don't like what's going on. When I can't take care of myself and I'm supposed to take care of other people too, I get angry a lot because things are not going the way I want them to. I just want life to be easy. I just want life to go the way I want it to. I just want this to be simple. And everybody seems to be complicating life. And because everybody seems to be complicating my life, I get angry very easily. Second thing that happens is I become avoidant. It's like, well, this is no fun. I'm just not even going to do this anymore. I mean, well, I got married because I thought life would be cool. This would be great. And frankly, I wouldn't have said it, but I thought somebody could take care of me. But all of a sudden you realize, no, they were actually hoping you'd take care of them. And so now we're going, well, this isn't as much fun as I thought, and this is a lot harder work than I thought. And the problem is, when I'm a boy, if I don't learn to do hard things and to work at hard things and to give myself, learn how to wait for the things that are good and work hard for those things, I don't learn how to serve other people. I don't just flip a switch and get that way when I become a man. And so I end up avoiding, and I start avoiding the wife that I married. I start avoiding my kids. I spend more time at work than I should. I go, I give myself to entertainment. I give myself to drinking and other kinds of more negative addictions that can really cause problems. And all of it is trying to help myself avoid. And so we get angry, we get avoidant, and we become addicted. And we become addicted sometimes to socially acceptable things, like, solitaire on the computer. Or we become but sometimes we get addicted to more hardcore things like pornography and alcohol and drugs and things that are really going to do some damage to our marriage and to our soul. And it's not that the little ones don't do damage, but they don't do as much damage. But what they do is they keep me detached. One of the things I've learned is that everybody has like a switch on the back of their neck. You can just picture a light switch right here on the back of your neck, connected to your spine. And it is connected to your spine, and I call it, Jim Wilder calls this your relational brain circuit switch. And what happens is, when I get overwhelmed and I don't feel like connecting with people, my switch is off. So sometimes after I'm done being at a gathering like this and I go back to my hotel room, I just don't feel like being around a lot of people. I flip off my switch, which is fine. We all have that capacity. It's fine to do that. But some of us have just learned to kind of live with our switch off. And when that's happening because your wife comes in to talk to you, and you can't disconnect from the computer long enough to talk to her. You can't, disconnect from your TV show long enough to talk to her. Or she's talking to you and you won't give her eye contact and you're just kind of sitting there. And she's getting more and more frustrated. And you say, but you can repeat back every word that she said. You said, well, I'm listening. See, you said, duh, 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 duh. But you never gave her eye contact. You never bonded relationally because your switch was down. If you flip your switch on, now it's like flipping your switch on, you turn and you look and you're here. And now it's about, okay, this is about you and me connecting. It's just not about me absorbing whatever information you happen to be giving me and me deciding if I want to do something about that someday. It is now flipping the relational brain circuit on is about, hey, let's connect, let's be bonded together, let's do this in a happy, healthy way. So that is part of being an adult male. It's part of being a man, is that part of learning to take care of people is learning to flip on that brain circuit and be connected to them and not just in the same room with them. I learned this early in my marriage the hard way. My wife and I had gotten a new place to stay. We were painting and we were cleaning and we were decorating. And we'd been working in the same room for about 8 hours that day, and my wife was like, I feel like we never spent any time together. And I was like, are you nuts? We just spent the last 8 hours together. And that was when I got it. I was in total task mode with my brain circuit turned off, just doing task. We were in the same room, but we were not connecting. And what she meant was, I feel like you never flip on your relational brain circuit and are just happy to be with me because it's me. This is important, and this will help us get into what are the 5 characteristics. What are the 5 characteristics from Proverbs chapter 3 that successful people, the habits that successful people cultivate? And let's go through those. First of all, chapter 3, verse 3, it says, let love and faithfulness never leave you. Bind them around your neck. That's the idea, you ever had a lanyard so that you keep a special key here, or a lanyard so that you keep like a jump drive or something? And the point of that lanyard is to keep this thing right where you're not going to forget it. Okay, so you know right where it is, you know you're going to use it. Well, what does the Bible say is the thing that we're supposed to keep most right around our neck, right here, so that we don't forget it? It says love is number 1, right? So he says, let love. And then the second word is faithfulness. Let me talk about that word just briefly, and then we'll talk about the two of them together. Faithfulness is an okay translation, but let me tell you, the Hebrew word there is the word from which we get the name Emmett, like Emmett Smith or Emmett, is a name. And that word literally means truth. It means truth. Now, so you say, let love and truth never leave you. I would think a better translation of that Hebrew word would be, let love and integrity never leave you. And look at the blessing that comes if we do. So it says, let love and integrity never leave you. Bind them around your neck. Write them on the tablet of your heart. Then you will do what? You will win favor and a good name in the sight of God and man. So let's look at this. I was explaining this to my son. I said, all right, what does a loving person look like? A loving person is somebody who cares about others. And I'm at this point, I'm looking at the way that he plays with his friends in the neighborhood, and I'm not seeing a whole lot of care. I'm not seeing a whole lot of, servanthood going on between him and his friends. I see a whole lot of bullying and pounding and name calling and fighting and stuff. And I'm like, would you say that there is any relationship in your life that is characterized by love? And he just kind of laughed. He goes, no, man, my friends are jerks. I said, have you ever considered that you can be a jerk? He didn't like that idea, but he had to admit that it was true. I said, well, what happened if your friends thought you really cared about them? If when you showed up, it wasn't all about you? Do you think that would change the way they look at you? If you show up someplace and people know it's not all about you, that you care about them, things change. And I told him, here's the secret to making friends. I'll share it with all of you. This is the secret for making friends. I got it from Ed Curry, who runs a ministry over in North Carolina. He said like this. He said, friends take big problems and make them smaller. Right? You want to make friends, take a problem and make it smaller for them. We all know people who, when they come, we know our problems are about to get bigger. And when you're the sort of person, when you show up, people know their problems are getting bigger, they tend to avoid you. But when they know you're on the way and that because you're coming, their problems are about to get smaller, guess what? People tend to want to be around you. And that's what I told my son. I said, that's part of loving other people. It's part of caring about them, is noticing their needs, noticing what's lacking in their life, and serving them by taking their big problems and making them smaller. Does that make sense? So I want to show that I care about other people by paying attention to what their needs are so that I can serve them more with greater, concern. Now, I was thinking in my mind, I kind of messed myself up. I was just thinking in my mind about, if you think about a butler or a maid in, back in the days when in England, when there were butlers and maids going around great manors, what made for a really excellent servant was that you got to know the person you were serving and you got to be able to anticipate their needs. In other words, you studied them, you knew their habits, you knew their needs, and so you would have things ready for them before they even walked into the room. I said, how many of us do that with our husbands and our wives? How many of us do that with the people closest to us in our words, where we care about them so much and we want to serve them so well that we've actually studied them to see what would make them the happiest? How can I serve them most effectively? Now that's love. I said, well, if we talk about integrity, I heard Chip Ingram several years ago do a talk where he talked about integrity, and he described it this way. He said, if you use your hands like this, he said, that these are my words and these are my deeds. My words and my deeds. He said, integrity is when they match. This is what it means to be a person of integrity, is people know that your words and your deeds match. He says, what happens when your words and your deeds don't match is you become kind of a blurry figure or you become a completely untrustworthy figure. Now, people either say, I'm not quite sure what to make of this person, or they say, I absolutely don't have anything to do with this person. Right? So if you get the reputation, you see how if I care about people and I am a servant to people and I'm somebody who makes their problems smaller, and if I'm a person of integrity and people say, you know what, when he says something, you can count on it. When he speaks, it's true. His words and his deeds match. Guess what? You are going to win favor and a good name with God and man. That's how it works. And that's why it says here, if you want to be a success in life, if you want to hear God say, well done, good and faithful servant at the end of the race, the two core qualities you never want to lose sight of are the ones that you keep right here, and that is love others, serve them well, and be a person of integrity. All right, let's go forward here. Trust in the Lord with all your heart, lean not on your own understanding, in all your ways submit to him, and he will make your path straight. Some of you have memorized this, right? Some of you, it's your life verse. I actually have it calligraphied in a nice little framed thing on the wall at home. But sometimes it can just be a motto or maxim. We don't really think about it. But it says, trust in the Lord with all your heart is not some ideal that we hope to maybe live up to someday. It's meant to be the fulcrum of our life. It's meant to be that balancing point for the seesaw of life. This is the stable thing on which everything else balances. This is the thing that makes all of the rest of these virtues possible. See, to trust in the Lord with all your heart basically means I believe that God is my provider. He is Jehovah Jireh. He's the one I trust to provide for me. If I can trust God to provide for me, it sets me free to provide for other people. So the foundation of being a servant is that you've got to have the confidence that you are going to be taken care of. The problem here is that many of us have been wounded in life, and the wounds in life have taught us not to trust God. We say, well, you can't trust God to take care of you. And you go back and you look at some things that happened in your life that you didn't like, that weren't good. But God's promise is not that nothing bad will ever happen to us. What's God's promise? That he will work all things together for good when? In the end. Right? So part of trusting God is we're not trusting him that nothing bad is ever going to happen to us and we're never going to come up short in a situation. We're trusting God that if we keep on the path that he has for us, in the end, it will work out. We will receive his blessing in the end. And when does the race end? At the finish line. Okay? That's when we got to get to. That's what we're striving to get to. We want to hear, well done, good and faithful servant at the end of the race. And what that means is that we have to grow in trust. Well, guess what? You cannot grow in trust without trials. If God never gave you trials and he never let bad things happen to you, your faith would never grow. It seems ironic, but think about it. The people of Israel, when they left Egypt and they went out into the desert, these people had been abused and mistreated for 400 years. They'd been slaves, and I'm thinking to myself, why didn't God bring them out and kind of coddle them for a little bit? Say, oh, you poor people. Man, you've been through so much. Here, let me just take you straight to the promised land and give you something and let you just rest and relax for a little bit. He didn't do that, did he? Why not? because he knew that waiting for them in the promised land were walled cities and giants and armies and a whole lot of occult activity, and that they needed to get prepared for the battles that they were going to face. And he wanted them to what? He wanted them to be a success in those battles. He wanted them to have victory in those battles and win them. So he said, I'm going to have to prepare you for that. And their entire boot camp experience coming from Egypt to the promised land was about one thing: learning to trust him. So how did he teach them to trust him? By taking them through one trial after another so that they could see how he provided for them in the end. It's not that they didn't get hungry. It's not that they didn't get thirsty. It's not that they get in places and look around and say, I see no solutions in sight. But that's what a trial is. It's when we get to a point when we look around and I don't see any solution in sight, but we go back to God and say, God, I don't understand this, but I'll do it your way anyway. And I'll keep doing things your way. And keep doing things your way, trusting you that in the end, it will produce a harvest of righteousness, that in the end, it will lead to the good thing that you're after. And so I do not grow weary in doing what is good. This is part of trusting God. This is at the cornerstone of the whole thing. And if we learn to trust God to take care of us, it sets us free then to be a person of integrity, to be a person who loves others. Let me cover these last two characteristics quickly. Do not be wise in your own eyes. How many of you needed to hear that today? See, here's the thing about it. Nobody who needs to hear that knows it. That is, people who are wise in their own eyes don't think it applies to them. We call them, psychologists call them narcissists. It's this idea that, they just don't see that they have made life all about them, but they don't see it. And this is something that I found that boys growing into men have to learn. And that is that boys left to themselves are almost always wise in their own eyes. And they have to be disciplined and trained out of that to learn to be humble. Now here's the thing. Are you going to be a good, effective servant if you're wise in your own eyes? Do you like people who are wise in their own eyes? Not really, no. They tend to rub you the wrong way. Here's the kicker. Sometimes they can be really charming people. And when you first meet them, you go, wow, I really like that person. But the longer you hang out with them, the more they rub you the wrong ways. You realize, hey, if I don't do everything exactly the way they want it, I become the bad guy. He said, do not be wise in your own eyes. Fear the Lord and shun evil. See, the primary characteristic of a fool in the book of Proverbs is that a fool is arrogant and thinks they know the difference between good and evil and doesn't want to hear it from you. The classic example of the fool in the Bible is the prodigal son. Right? The prodigal son, his father is like God. His father is the wise father who wants nothing but for his son to be a success. He wants nothing for his son to have a life that is blessed. But the son is wise in his own eyes. The son is convinced, hey, don't bother me with that. I know where to find the good life. I know where to find success. I know where to find the life I'm looking for. All I need is a little cash. And he took off. The Bible says there is a road that leads to destruction. And oftentimes people don't even know they're on it. And that happens when we're wise in our own eyes. And so because I love my son, because I want him to grow up to be a successful man, guess what? I need my son to be teachable. I want him to be humble. I want him to understand that he needs to have a vision for his own success. And what do we want? We all want our kids to own that for themselves. So it becomes a habit. But go back to this, like I talked about, make your bed in the morning, make sure the dirty clothes get in the laundry basket. Do kids discipline themselves that way naturally? Every once in a while you find some unique creature, who just loves everything neat. I know those are amazing. God bless you if you got a child like that. But it's like most kids, most kids know. But you know what happens if you make them do it and it becomes a habit for them? At some point in their life, they don't want to not be that way. At some point in their life, they don't like it when their bed's not made. They don't like it when things aren't neat. And guess what's happened? They have been trained. And now they have owned the value for themselves. It has become theirs. But that is not going to happen without training and without discipline. So we move forward. Not only do we tell people they need them to be humble. We need them to not be wise in their own eyes, to be humble, to be teachable. And then finally, we read here, honor the Lord with your wealth, with the first fruits of all your crops. Then your barns will be filled to overflowing, and your vats will brim over with new wine. Part of trusting God, in fact, I heard it put this way, that how you handle your money is faith 101. That when God wants to teach you to grow in faith and grow in your trust in Him, He'll deal with you in the area of money. That this is like kindergarten of faith. Because, let's face it, there are no greater faith challenges in our life other than health, and family problems and, really personal suffering other than money, right? And so money's so concrete. It's like, I'm going to be able to pay my bills, or I'm not going to be able to pay my bills. I'm going to be able to do this, I'm not going to be able to do this. And so it's one of those things where, can I really trust God or not? If I learn to trust God and I give Him the first part of what He gives me, what I'm doing is I am acknowledging that God, I acknowledge that this is all is from you, that this isn't about me, and that if I'm going to get the well done, good and faithful servant at the end, this is part of it. This is part of it, that it's part of your training ground for me to teach me to trust. And it not only teaches me to trust, but it teaches me to be generous. Right? By giving more than I really want to give, out of that first fruits there, more than I feel like I can afford to give. If I do that long enough, it begins to train me to be generous with other people, that to not be afraid to give of what I have, to help other people. And it helps me to be a servant to others and not just to be preoccupied with myself. So these are 5 habits of, you might call them the 5 habits of highly successful people from Book of Proverbs. Let me just wrap up here with a couple of thoughts. And I have found that if I want to in my own life make changes, if I've said, you know what, I don't feel like I'm being successful in this area, I need to make changes. I find that I need 3 things, and I just want to share these with you. Number 1, I need a clear vision of what it is I'm trying to do. I'll tell you the opposite of a clear vision. I heard the story about a guy who drove up onto a farmer's property, and there was a barn there, and this guy had apparently been doing target practice because there were 3 targets painted on the side of the barn, and each one of them had a perfect bullseye. And the guy pulls up and he goes, man, he says, you must be a really good shot. And the farmer says, oh yeah, I never miss. He goes, really? He goes, well, what's your secret? He goes, I shoot the barn first and then I draw the target. When we live life without a vision and we don't know what we're shooting at and where we're aiming at, we don't, oftentimes we just kind of hope to correct it later and make it all work out. But let me tell you something about vision that I've learned. Vision comes from a heart that wants to serve. A vision in life is about looking out in the world around you and saying, there are problems out there are hurting people out there are injustices out there are things that are just not right, and somebody needs to do something about it, and I want to be somebody who serves by making a difference in the areas where somebody's hurting. And you know what's interesting is God will put a different vision in almost every one of your hearts. Some of you are going to get really passionate about youth and say, we really got to reach our teens. Some of you get really passionate about children, saying, we got to raise these kids up so we don't lose that generation. Some of you are going to get really, passionate about hurting people whose hearts have been broken and who need to be mended. Some of you will be passionate about people overseas or reaching the lost, or a particular part of the community. But God births a vision in you, and the vision is always born out of a desire for service. Have you noticed that? My vision is always born out of a desire for service, and it's all part of the same thing because God says, I want to bless you by giving you something to do on this race that is going to serve other people, but is going to be fulfilling to you at the same time as you engage in it. And when you get done, it's all part of the well done, good and faithful servant. Having a vision. So part of the question here is, what is the vision that God is birthing in your heart? What is the area of service God is birthing for you? Now, here comes the challenge. For some of you who've been doing this for a while, it is sometimes easy to get so caught up in the big vision of what we want to do that we have not developed a vision for our own families. That we have not developed a vision for how am I going to serve my wife? What are her needs? What are the things that I need to do to help her? I may be so preoccupied out here with how do I, fulfill my vision for this thing out here, but I'm missing the close-in picture, or I don't have a vision for my kids. It says, how am I preparing and training them to be successful later on in life? Am I giving them what they need in order to be successful later? If not, maybe I need to spend some time with God and try to renew my vision for the people closest to me and not just have a vision for the great big things out there in the world. So I find I need a vision if I'm going to make some changes, if I'm going to see things go in a different direction. Secondly, I find I need a team. Have you ever noticed when I was on a team, I would kill myself running. I hate running. Some people love running. They find it relaxing. I hate running. Right? I was an athlete my whole life. I played tennis, basketball, volleyball, football, baseball. Basically, there was a ball in it. I played it. And I would play to get in shape, which later on caught up with me because I remember when I was in middle-aged and I went and played basketball and I kind of came home sore. And my brother says, Marcus, you're supposed to get in shape to play basketball, not play basketball to get in shape. I'm like, yeah, I know. But I hate running. But you know what? When I was on a team, I can remember getting up and running 3 miles every day just to start my day, just to start getting myself in shape, to do what I wanted to do. I find when I'm part of a team, I will make sacrifices I won't make if I'm not part of a team. And being part of a team is great in sports. We all kind of get that. But what does a team look like when it comes to helping my marriage? What does a team look like when it comes to being a better parent? What does a team, look like? And I think a team looks like being part of a small group, and that is having somebody else who is on a similar journey with you. It's like going to the health club by yourself versus having a partner there, or having 4 or 5 people who do this together. Being part of a team, finding somebody else who's going in that same direction, either joining a group that's already established or forming a group or at least getting a partner. And then finally, the thing I found is having a coach. And that is having somebody who's been down this path before who can help. And I'm amazed how many men don't want to go to marriage counseling. I'm just amazed by it. And the same guys would have no problem getting a personal trainer to help them become better at hunting or fishing or weightlifting or some kind of sport activity. But to find a personal trainer to help them get better at their marriage is somehow not okay. I mean, if I want to get better at something, I usually need a coach who's going to give me some guidance on what exactly I should be doing, give me some help on how I need to be doing this, and he's going to be guiding me that. I find if I have a coach, if I have a team, and I have a vision, amazing changes are possible in my life. If I don't have those things, the odds of any kind of change whatsoever taking place almost go out the window. Almost go out the window. So I'm not here today to criticize or condemn or to make anybody feel ashamed of anything. My goal here is to try to offer solutions, to try to offer a positive vision of what is possible and encourage you, take the steps here. If you are in that stage where you have kids, get a vision for your parenting. If you're at the stage where you're married, have a vision for your marriage. If you're in the stage now where you're free to do some things out in the community, develop a vision for how you're going to serve out in the community and begin praying and asking God to help bring those things to fruition, because our goal is to get to the end of our journey and have God say, well done, good and faithful servant, you have won the prize. Let's pray. Father God, thank you so much for your graciousness and not just dumping us here on earth and saying, good luck, I hope it goes well. But you loved us enough that you gave us the scriptures. You loved us enough, you've given us your church. You've loved us enough that you gave us your Holy Spirit. Lord, I just pray now that as each person here will take what the Holy Spirit has specifically had for them and that it will come to life and it will burn in there and it will stay with them until activity happens. And I ask this in Christ's name. Amen.